A hunter of hunters, tasked by an angel to bring down one demon cursed. A planeswalker of Magic the Gathering who's been a part of the game's story since 2009 and who players have been able to play with for just as long, but has never gotten a card, until recently. Who is Vronos, and what is his unique history in Magic the Gathering? Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. We're getting more spoilers for Magic's upcoming set, Commander Masters, and while it looks to be a very reprint-heavy set specifically for the Commander format, there are a few new gems coming for us in the Vronos community. We're seeing a bunch of older Planeswalkers getting cards for the very first time, such as Commodore Guff, who I've recently just covered in another video. Commodore Guff is the face card for a Commander Masters precon deck where Planeswalkers matter, called, appropriately, Planeswalker Party, in which you can find the topic of today's video, the mysterious Vronos Masked Inquisitor. Now, if you don't recognize this character, I don't blame you. You would have to be a real lore nut or enjoyer of extremely old console-based MTG video games to have ever seen this Planeswalker before. And even then, you'd probably have no clue about his story, something I'd like to rectify in this video. We'll discuss Vronos' new card in Commander Masters, the character's lore, as well as his unique history with the game of Magic the Gathering. Before we begin though, if you enjoy our videos here at the Ether Hub, show your support by leaving this video a like, sharing it with friends, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping this channel grow. Now let's get into the lore. In Commander Masters Planeswalker Party Precon, a Super Friends inspired deck, you'll find the blue Planeswalker Vronos Masked Inquisitor. Costing 3 generic and double blue, Vronos enters with 5 loyalty counters. His +1 ability, up to 2 other target planeswalkers you control phase out at the beginning of the next end step. Phasing out means that you can treat them and anything attached to them as though they don't exist until your next turn. Its -2 ability, for each opponent, return up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls to its owner's hand. And finally, his ultimate at -7, target artifact you control becomes a 9/9 construct artifact creature and gains vigilance, indestructible, and this creature can't be blocked. Being in a Planeswalkers Matter deck, there really isn't much of a better supporting Planeswalker than Vronos. Now, in fairness, I haven't run a Super Friends deck, but when the name of the game is Planeswalkers, I know protecting them ranks high up on priorities, and Vronos is all about protecting other Planeswalkers. It's a weird card to judge for me because usually I look at how well a Planeswalker can protect itself from incoming damage, because the best Planeswalkers are those alive long enough to actually use their abilities. But Vronos here does a better job at protecting others with its +1 ability, since he cannot target himself with phasing. On the other hand, the phasing out of Planeswalkers at the end step is probably the best form of protection they can possibly receive, and it hits 2 of them. Opponents' creatures, spells, nothing can target them. It's literally the ultimate shield. And yeah, he can technically protect himself in a way with his -2, and in a multiplayer format like Commander, it gains a lot of value. It's still only a single creature per opponent though, which isn't nearly as good as protecting himself as the phasing out is. Still, it'll save you from a lot of damage and is great at slowing down opponents with creature-based strategies. Now for me, Vronos is in a supportive role, and I'd just be slamming those +1s on my more impactful Planeswalkers and using Vronos like a sponge. So with that and how controlly his abilities are, it's pretty easy to imagine getting off his ultimate. But as good as a 9/9 Vigilance Indestructible cannot be blocked creature is, it's hardly a game winner. 1 pacifism and it's out of commission. Plus you have to already have an artifact out to target with it. There's a lot you have to do. His fate as a card, at least how I would play him, would be to just phase out other Planeswalkers until his inevitable demise, which actually works pretty well with how his story goes in MTG's lore. Born on the plane of Innistrad, Vronos grew up surrounded by darkness and the wild, hellish beasts who hunt within it. For the only light that could be found on Innistrad came from the angelic glow of Avacyn, their archangel and their protector, a figure he would pray to and eventually serve as a member of her church when he came of age. As a boy, his village would be lost to the darkness. A plague, a warping, twisting sickness took hold of his family and his community. It was a tough thing for someone so small to witness. His loved ones, even his sister, turned into monsters right before his eyes. Vronos powerless to stop it. It was harder still to witness the consequences of this darkness, the Cathars of the church charging in, butchering the afflicted, throwing their bodies to the fires, hoping the blessed sleep would take them. It was the only comfort left. After losing everything, young Vronos was brought into the church as an orphan. He grew hard through these trials, learned to fight with righteous vigor, and studied the evil he would eventually vanquish as a new Inquisitor of Avacyn. Serving his angel, Vronos led a campaign against a pack of werewolves who had been terrifying the countryside. He often suffered from nightmares, but on one particular night, that dream would become reality. He's awakened by a crushing weight on his chest, the sting of razor cuts on his face, and the warm drip of ichor rolling down his neck. A beast was atop him, slashing with blood-crazed eyes. A werewolf. He willed Avacyn in silent prayer and roared louder than the monster, thrusting his small silver dagger into its barreled chest, tossing it aside with almost inhuman strength. Though his face was mangled, Vronos looked around to assess the threat. It was extensive. The pack had invaded under the cover of night, catching his troops off guard. There were so many already lost. When the werewolves were felled, they reverted back to their previously human shapes. Vronos noticed that these were smaller than his men, although more ferocious. He looked down to see a young girl, slashed through the shoulder, red teeth wrapped around hunks of flesh. These werewolves were but afflicted children. To Vronos, this was a curse most foul. There were no innocents, he thought, and charged. The beast turned to the crazed Cathar, who slashed indiscriminately at his enemies. He drew their attention, and monster after monster leapt for him until his world turned to black. He hadn't realized it, but his latent Planeswalker spark had ignited in his most desperate moment. He found himself in a calm, clean world, grasping at his facial injuries, still in pain and shock. It was a place of cold metal and sleek design. He had no name for it, but we know it as the Shard of Esper on the plane of Alara. He's approached by a thin, bald, blue humanoid figure. Nothing in the church's lore wrote about such a creature. This wasn't Innistrad, nor was it the Blessed Sleep. This was a Valdalkin researcher who stumbled upon the wounded man, believing him to be a part of an experiment they had been conducting. They thought his injury may have been a result of his planeswalking. They recognized the possibility of traveling between worlds after having studied news of one Elspeth Terrell, a planeswalker who also spent time on Alara. The Valdalkin researchers believed Vronos carried many valuable secrets and took him in. These Valdalkin were part of the Aethersworn, a group of researchers who were, at the time, busy studying the travels between worlds. While they didn't know about planeswalking specifically, Alara being a plane made up of different shard realities, had itself experienced interplanar travel in the past. They believed Vronos could help them unlock its secrets. Vronos agreed to help them in their research, but on one condition: he demanded knowledge. The Aethersworn hoarded vast stores of otherworldly knowledge, information Vronos wanted to use back on Innistrad to help fight off evil. Vronos would again planeswalk for them, trading his experiences of other worlds for anything the Aethersworn knew about magic metal weaving, an art form these people seemingly perfected. Learning quickly the arts of artificy, Vronos began crafting his own Ethereum body parts, a practice those on Esper regularly engaged in. He repaired his face with bits of this magic alloy and crafted himself a filigree mask to cover his disfigurement. The magic of the Ethereum metal only served to enhance his focus and vision, even to the point that he could follow trails in the ether, the space between planes. He could track others like him, other planeswalkers. Learning what he could, Vronos felt prepared to return to Innistrad to serve his people once again, but feared Avacyn wouldn't have him, for he had twisted himself from his once pure state. Returning to the Grand Church of Avacyn, kneeling before an altar of the angel in the great cathedral, Vronos asked for forgiveness. Then his angel appeared to him, Avacyn, with nothing but love in her eyes. Vronos again pledged his loyalty, begging for her most dangerous tasks and trials, feeling he can now better serve the church, and Avacyn nodded. Campaign after campaign, Vronos would lead companies against the darkest creatures Innistrad had to offer. With his Ethereum, knowledge, and new artificy powers, along with the new magic afforded to him by his Planeswalker spark, Vronos was the most inspiring Inquisitor of the Church in raw combat ability. Even the monsters of the night came to singularly fear him, dubbing him the Grey Fencer. After several weary nights, a messenger angel came to Vronos with new orders directly from Avacyn. It would be the most troubling fight yet, but one most dire. He hastily traveled to his angel's audience. Avacyn again appeared before the hunter, with solemn eyes and sadness shadowing the angel's words. She explained that the one who had freed her from the Hell Vault, restoring hope to Innistrad, was also responsible for a great evil now stalking innocence. If Avacyn had had the choice, she would have remained locked within the Hell Vault along with countless demons if it meant sparing the weak from this coming shadow. Most troubling of all, it was a Planeswalker roaming cursed on Innistrad. Like Vronos, he could take his affliction to other worlds, an injustice Avacyn would not allow. His task was not to kill this man, for this fate was not his choice, nor was it his ultimate end. Vronos was to bring the curse to Avacyn, so that she could heal him, before it was too late and he was too far gone. A demon in his own right. Vronos could follow him where others in her charge could not. Only he could do this for her, to spare countless worlds of this potential wrath and corruption. Without hesitation, Vronos agreed. Avacyn spoke the man's name, Garruk. Vronos didn't know the backstory, he didn't need it. He sought out lore only to aid him in hunting monsters, not to understand their intentions of evil. As Avacyn willed it, he would see it done. He didn't know that Garruk, a planeswalker like him, was also cursed with the dark magic of the Chain Veil by Liliana Vess, the same person who shattered the Hell Vault. For most of his life, Garruk Wildspeaker was a hunter like Vronos, a stalker of great beasts, felling anything that posed a challenge. Still, he had no love in his heart for evil or unnatural things. That is, until the Chain Veil warped his mind and powers with shadowed intent. Now teetering between man and demon, Garruk continues to hunt dangerous game, now targeting angels and even more damning, other planeswalkers. What he referred to as the most dangerous game of all. In this state is how Vronos finds Garruk. Using his ether tracking Ethereum, he found the hulking man with some ease. But finding him was the easy part. Bringing him back to Avacyn for cleansing would take a bit more effort. Vronos approached the target without subtlety, stating proudly that he was there to bring Garruk to the angels for deliverance. The beast man simply smirked, raised his giant axe and swung down hard on Vronos. He stepped back, drawing a crossbow from his back and launching an Ethereum bolt enchanted with a subdual charm. But Garruk backhanded the arrow with ease. In a low growl, he summoned a bear from the ether, only it was sickly and diseased, but still no less dangerous. In turn, Vronos summoned his own metallic minion to fend off the animal. In tow, Garruk howled and yet more beasts of the wilds appeared, forcing Vronos to quickly craft up more Ethereum allies. The quiet forest turned into a war zone with two armies vying for an opening. But where it seemed Garruk's forces were endless, Vronos was bound by how much metal was around him to craft with. He could keep using the scraps of those fallen to make more, but it took more time. He was clearly losing the battle. Nothing he did was enough to stop the enraging Garruk. The curse fouled his nature magic, and he grew in size and strength as the fight dragged on. He muscled his way through the servants Vronos threw at him, and hurled his heavy axe down upon the shoulders of his masked assailant. The wound would be mortal if not addressed. Vronos again slipped into the void, choosing to live and try again to fulfill his charge another day. Garruk could be heard howling, not in victory but in despair. He would not be satisfied, his bloodlust not quenched until Vronos was ended. Appearing at the mouth of a cave Vronos had used an encampment in the past, he would fade in and out of consciousness as he bled from his wound. Eventually, he would recover enough to stand up and assess the situation. He needed a healer or else he wouldn't survive. The clerics of the church. Maybe they could teach him some healing spells of his own when he returned to them. It would prove useful in the next encounter with Garruk. But first, he needed food and water. He was already weak and growing weaker by the minute. He steps out into the forest and spots a doe grazing in a thicket. He lets loose an arrow and hits it squarely in the neck. It barely moves before falling over. A great gift from Avacyn, Vronos thought. But as he moves closer to the kill to reap its reward, a shadow appeared above him, blotting out the moonlight. Garruk, the Planeswalker hunter, would not be denied his prey. His axe whistled down, cutting through the air, sharp and swift. Vronos bowed his head, and darkness took him. At the start of this video, I mentioned that there was more to this character than simply the game's lore. We, as players, have known about and even played with Vronos for years without there actually being a card for him. That's because Vronos was actually the default player avatar for the predominantly console-based Magic the Gathering game, Duel of the Planeswalkers. If you're not familiar with this series of game, it's essentially a precursor to what we have now with Magic Arena, except much more limited in scope. I for one have fond memories of playing the original Duel of the Planeswalkers on the Xbox back when I was like 19 years old, and yes, I played as Vronos. So me and Vronos go way back, well before his official card in Commander Masters. Him being the default player avatar, well, it obviously didn't mean much to the story or to the player base. But Wizards of the Coast decided to run with this hardly fleshed out head shrouded in a mask and actually turn them into a full-fledged character. Over the course of the Duels of the Planeswalker series, we learned a little bit more about Vronos until his official story was dropped in 2015, introducing that year's iteration of the game. Along with the official story laying out Vronos' character origins, titled The Hunter Cannot Pity, written by Jennifer Wilkes, Vronos was even heavily featured in the Magic 2015 trailer, which goes perfectly with Vronos' story as it was written. Personally, I loved it. For as short as it was back when there was a strong correlation between the set's trailers and the story in the set. But yeah, this is a Planeswalker that many of us have at least loosely experienced all the way back in 2009, who just shy of 14 years later is finally getting a card we can play with. Vronos, you earned it. And that, you guys, is going to do it for today's MTG lore video. Now I kick it back to you guys in the comments. Do you remember playing as Vronos in Duels of the Planeswalkers? Do you miss those style of games on console? Do you like his new Planeswalker card in Commander Masters? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, consider supporting the channel by leaving a like, sharing it with friends, and becoming a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping this channel grow. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!